Well, hello, welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny, and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. Now, this is going to be part 4 of our Trumpeter Russian SAM-6 anti-aircraft missile transporter launcher vehicle. Now this video, what we're going to be doing is taking care of the launch rails and the Erector mechanism and the turntable, all this stuff that actually goes on top of the vehicle, where say on a tank where the turret would be. And of course, without all that, we don't have anything to hold our missiles, which we made in our last video. So yeah, there's quite a few parts in this, and it can get a little complicated, I think. Just looking from at the instructions. So let's go ahead, jump down on the bench, and get started with this. All right, so let's go ahead and jump off by taking a look at our instructions. So we've already built up our missiles in step 12, and here we are in step 13. And that's where we start to build up our launcher. And as you can see, it looks like we've got the base for it, which is 2 pieces there to put together. And then there is this box that goes on the back of it, and it has some linkages, and also it has some hinges. So that box is the elevating mechanism to allow our launch rails to be erected. So you can see these, how they, we also have these hoses here that goes in. It'll be interesting to fool with those, I guess. So I'm kind of concerned about these hinges here and how they're supposed to attach, because it doesn't look like there's anything to go on the inside, and the box is already sealed. So let's take a look at this. Here is the upper section, and then of course the lower section of this base assembly. Now once we glue this together, there's no getting inside it. So you're just not going to be able to reach inside there and fix anything if there's something amiss. So what we want to look at is going to be these hinges and these links, I think. So here's one of them. Yeah, it's not really a hinge, it's a rotating mechanism, I guess, to raise the launcher. And then we have that link, and that'll just kind of pop in there, just like so. And then it just fits into the side of the box. And it seems to be quite a bit of play there. I don't see how that's supposed to stay inside. So, and as you can see, once you glue the bottom on this thing, there's no getting in there. So, I mean, it looks like it's got a long pin on it. So, if we were to take just the edge of it there, the edge of the base, and kind of see how it lines up, there's not any rotational room for that pin if you decide to put a cap on it. So I think I'm going to think about that, and we're just going to go ahead and build up this box. Now, of course, I've gone and cleaned up all these parts so that we don't have any issues during the assembly. And it's a fairly simple affair here to put this box together. We have that kind of U-shaped piece, and then a front and a back for it. And then we'll just get that cemented together. Now they kind of want to bow out a little bit, and that's okay. We'll just go ahead and put a clamp on them, make sure that they're fully seated, and then we'll come back in and sand the ends of them flat, just to make sure everything looks good, you know. Get it all dressed up for us, and we'll go ahead and clamp both ends of it there so it doesn't separate on us. So I just give it a few minutes there to kind of make sure that everything has stuck together there. So I do want to flat sand this a little bit here so we don't have any problems there. There's a slight protrusion there, and I just want it to be a nice, smooth, even fit there. So we'll do this first, and then we can go ahead and put the bottom on. And there we go. It looks good. So just checking to make sure that our corners are good. So it looks good, nice and flat. We can go ahead and seal that together. And like I mentioned before, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of dress the ends of these, make sure that they're nice and flat. Because of this molding process, it can be just a little bit off, which is a case that I found here. So we do have these connection points here for those links that we looked at earlier. And so we're going to go ahead and attach these. And we do want to make sure that they're nice and secure. So I use plenty of extra thin on this, probably way too much. So when it comes to the second one, though, for some reason, it really doesn't want to seat exactly flat against the face of the box there. So what we need to do is we'll just go ahead and just kind of sand it a little bit there. That way we have the right fitment, so it's nice and flush. And is that even a word, fitment? I think so. I think it is. But as you can see, the way this box has gone together, it does have a small lip there on the bottom, and I think that's for aligning those rails, our launch rails. And we do want to make sure that we leave that intact. So just modifying these links a little bit, that'll be fine. And we do have one other little part that needs to go on the top section of the box here, and it's just simply just, you know, cement in place. That's all it takes there. But I do go back in with my tweezers and make sure that it is aligned. You know, it should be square to the box. Now when it comes to the hinge portion, their connection tabs there are different sizes, so we don't have to worry about getting them mixed up and putting, you know, the wrong one on whichever side. So just pay attention to that, and we'll cement one in place and just make sure it's fully seated, and then we can go ahead and check the alignment with our actual base there. I just want to be sure that I'm not putting it on backwards. So, all right, so that does fit. And let's just go ahead and throw the other hinge section on and just press it down into that slot there. Just a tab and slot. And we just got to line the pin up in the side of our base there. And with it in place, we'll just cement that. Now we can take a look and make sure that, well, we haven't glued it, keep it from actual hinging. And it does hinge, no problem. So with everything straight, I think we'll just go ahead and put this little square plate that goes on. I don't know why they just didn't mold it on, but since they didn't, we'll just go ahead and cement that into place. Okay, so now we can take a look at these links that we have for erecting our launch rails. So we have this long link, and you do have to use some pressure to actually get that thing pushed in there. But you know, the instructions doesn't tell us not to cement these, which is kind of weird because you really don't want to cement these if you want the actual missiles to erect. And I'm not sure how that's all going to work out, but as you can see, the mechanism works. So that's good. We'll go ahead and stick the one on the opposite side. Same process, we just press it in to that bracket there. Get that long link pressed in. There it goes. Once it snaps, it's good to go. So this, I mean, it's obviously made to actually work. So, and there's no way to line anything up on, you know, where you want this box oriented if you was just going to glue it in the down position or in the up position. So again, we're looking, and there's just not much room for a cap or something to keep these from falling out, because that long link really, as you can see, it's really loose. See, just fooling with it there, it almost came out. So we're going to have to do something about that. So you could do a long rod in between the two, cut the pins off and drill it out, and maybe put some brass rod or something like that in there. But the solution I came up with is a little bit different. So we're just going to melt them. That's hillbilly way. But by doing it this way, we don't have to do a whole lot of modification and building and stuff. So this is just a nail stuck into a handle so that the handle doesn't get hot while we're heating the nail up. And I'm just going to use this tea light right here. I think that's plenty of heat. No need to fire up the torch. And when we go to melt these over, we're going to kind of push it kind of up a little bit at an angle, as you can see right there. We're pushing away from that seam where the bottom is going to be glued on. And we're just going to melt that so that it kind of bends up. Sort of like bending a nail over in a board, I guess. That's probably a good analogy of how this is kind of working out. And then we got the other side to do. So it's important that we do rotate and move the mechanism back and forth just to make sure that we're not melting and being really careful not to bend it over so much and melt and fusing it to the inside of the upper portion of the base. Okay, I hope that's clear. I'm trying to be as clear and concise as possible. So anyway, that's how in my mind this thing is supposed to work. And we just give it a little check there to make sure that everything is fine. And that's going to work, I think, fantastic. So now I don't have to worry about it anymore, and I don't think they're going to pop out. They shouldn't. So and of course the way we melted those over, we still have plenty of room for the base to go on, or the base of the base. So that's up next. So we're going to go ahead and attach this. We can close this up now. And if you remember in the instructions, they wanted you to do this very first. And I'm glad I didn't take that route, because our little arms over there would be falling out of the mechanism, and we don't want that. So we'll just go ahead and cement this up. Now, I failed to mention it before, but this bottom piece really needs some sanding, and you really got to, adjust those joints there to get it to seat correctly. So anyway, once we get it glued up here or cemented up, I do want to recheck, since we're using, to me, extra thin. I don't want to accidentally cement those movable pieces there. We don't want to glue those pins in place. Now we can continue with the construction. So we have these fittings that go on the back of the base, and simple little tab and slot kind of orientation here. We'll just press them in and then use a little bit of, to me, extra thin there to make sure that they're nice and secure for us. And I also want to make sure that they're kind of square with each other, so I do use my tweezers there to kind of align them. And with that done, we have a couple of elbows that needs to go on. And the holes for these elbows is, well, the hole's too big. So you got to kind of line this up to make sure that it's not offset. And I hope that doesn't create any kind of issue, because I would really like for this to be a tight fit. Because we do have that tubing that goes in between them, and I'm not sure about how compressible that tubing is, so I guess we're going to find out later on. So we do want to check also, we have this, well, it's not really a quadrant, but it is the geared portion, a slight arc there that raises the mechanism to get our launch rails into position, and it is a little bit too thick for the slot. I've kind of opted to thin it out just a little bit here, just by sanding down the sides of it. Now the idea here is that hopefully it will still be a working mechanism once it's fully assembled. And of course we do have to allow for the thickness of the paint, because paint has thickness, and if it's really tight when we go to assemble it, then it's not going to work for us once we get it painted. So getting that just enough clearance for it so that it's going to work. And I think I got enough. At least I hope I do. So with that completed, we can move on. Check our instructions again. So we've got all this together. The only thing that we haven't done is those tubes. So there is a spring that goes over top of those tubes. Kind of make it a very interesting look anyway. And that's kind of a neat way of doing that. So let's see what we have there. So the instruction says 20 millimeters. And so I am going to check and see. So I'm measuring out about 18 millimeters. Of course, with the compound angle we got to do there, then yeah, 20 millimeters is probably about right. So I do want to check, make sure that the other side's the same. So that's what we're going to go with. So we'll cut us a couple of pieces here, 20 millimeters in length. And we can go ahead and insert these. Now I don't have the springs on them yet. I'm just kind of test fitting it to see how this is going to work out for us. So we'll go ahead and get it on, and I will tell you that this tubing is really stiff. That's kind of concerning. And yeah, it's kind of pushing that fitting out. So we're going to set that aside and let that dry some more because we don't want that elbow being pushed off. So step 14, these are our launch rails. So we have 3 different launch rails, and they are different. And then we got the, I guess it's like a connection rail that ties all 3 of them together. So we'll start working on these now. Alright, so let's go ahead and build up some launch rails. So a little bit of sanding here, there's a little bit of flash around that pin. So we just want to check and see if it's going to go together. Okay. And it is a bit fiddly, as you can tell. Okay, so that's how that goes together. And all 3 of these rails assemble exactly the same way. However, some of the parts are a little bit different, so you got to make sure that you keep everything separated and just build one at a time. That way you're not putting the wrong, say, bottom structure mated to the wrong sides, because that will affect how it's all going to go together, which would be bad. So checking the fit here. It looks like we're going to have some gaps, especially up towards the end of it there where it tapers. So we need to do something about that. So back to the sanding stick here, and this one little pin area that I'm actually sanding on. It's got a really rounded, tapered end on it, so I'm not worried about removing too much because the sides is going to keep the proportions correct. But if they are too long, it'll keep it from closing up the gaps. So we'll go back and try again. And it's just a matter of fitting this together. I probably should have just taped it, but trying to hold it with my fingers. So once I get all the gaps out of that thin tapered end there, I think we'll be okay. I'm not really worried if there's a small gap there, just as long as the parts actually touch together, where we get some extra thin in there to get it cemented together. So now we're just going to go ahead and start cementing it up. And it's really worth mentioning that you do need to test fit all these parts and
do the best you can to get it all so that you've got as little seam as possible. We don't want any great big gaps. And here's the, this end is going to be connected to that box that we built for the Erector. So we're just going to cement this together. So it's kind of a hollow box of a sort. And then we can go ahead and put, this is the actual bottom of it. And we'll put that into place. And we'll cement that up. And then we'll go ahead and put the top on. And this has the rails for it, or at least half the rails for our missiles. And just, if you need to do a little bit of sanding, then you'll have to do a little bit of sanding. Now, I did find that this one is just a little bit long, as you can see right there. So we're going to fit that. And keep in mind we have 2 more to go. So, but we're not going to build all 3 of them in the video. Although I do build them up, but we are just, this is just how each one of them goes together. They all go together the same. And then we'll go ahead, since we had to modify this, we can go ahead and cement it into place. And this is going to be the top of these guide rails here, or launch rails. Keeping your orientation correct is important because the instructions is going to show us when we go to put these kind of together that it's going to be upside down in the view, so need to keep that in mind. So that was our hose attachment point there that we put on, and now we have the forward section of our guide rails. So I'm just gluing up the tip end of it there, right where my thumb's at, and we have a left and a right. So this one is on. And then we'll put the one on the other side. And the reason why I'm not gluing the rails down is because I'm really not sure what that's supposed to look like. I mean, they're supposed to be straight, but we may have to do some modification. So we're just going to leave them, the tails on it, so to speak, loose for the time being. So next up, this is the adjoining structure that keeps them all equal distance from one another. So it's kind of like a beam. And it does have a tapered fit. So that piece that we're cementing in right now, the sides of it or the edges, I should say, they're all tapered. So you do have to do a little bit of sanding on that to get it to fit because it wants to bulge out in the middle. As you can see here, I'm using my tweezers to keep it flush. And then we're just going to apply the cement, and that'll kind of keep us keep it true, or as true as I can manage. And this is the travel lock for it, and that keeps the entire assembly from swinging around while the vehicle's in motion. So we'll cement that into place. And then we have 2 storage boxes of some kind, or that could be some sort of mechanism inside there, but they are identical boxes, so they just need to go over the tabs that are there and make sure that they're fully seated, and we'll cement them down. So we're going to return back to those large pieces of tubing. I'm just going to slide the springs over top of them that came in the kit there. And as you can see, I've already gotten one on, and we'll just go ahead and slide the other one on. And I still feel that they're too tight, but I don't know. I mean, I plan on displaying this with the missiles in their firing position, so I think that they're going to be too long for that, because when you go to raise the missiles, they don't have enough compressibility. They just seem to be a little bit too stiff. So we're going to take and try that out. And yeah, see how they're buckling? Yeah, I think they're just too long for the position that we wanted. Now, if we wanted to leave it in the down position, this would be fine. But maybe that 20 millimeters is too much. So as you can see, it's already started to pull that part loose, and it kind of turned white right there in the seam. So either I haven't let it dry enough, or there's just not enough support there for how much tension we're putting on it. So I'm going to keep thinking about that. So we'll just re-cement these parts and set it aside, kind of get them the angle recorrected here. And let that really dry up. So we do have these little winged sections here that goes on right behind the rails there. And they don't really want to fit, and I kind of thought that might be the case. So, yeah, we're going to do a little bit of modification there to make sure that these things are going to seat properly. I'm going to make sure that these rails, which we haven't actually cemented down to the to the top side of our launch rail there, or the thing that holds the rails, and then also just a little bit of sanding there on that winged block to get everything to go in without being under a lot of tension there. And then we can cement all that down and make sure that our rails are straight, and then we can cement those as well. So next we need to check the fit here of where these rails mount. As you can see, they've got kind of a large pin there that mounts in those holes on that beam. We'll call it a spreader beam. So checking the two end ones, they do set flush, which is the way it's supposed to go. And then we'll check the center one. Always check the parts where they're supposed to be. And as you can see, it doesn't go into the hole. Okay, so apparently it has a little bit more taper on it than the other two, so it's not going fully seated. So I start off with a drill bit that is a little tight going into the hole. Not really removing much plastic here, and I don't know if that's going to be enough or not. So we will take and select us another drill bit, and kind of get it ready there, and we'll just check to make sure. Yeah. So this is the next size up, and we're just going to make that hole just a little bit larger. And it's important that you don't mix these rails up, because there is a center rail and there's a left rail and a right rail. And I'll show you how to identify them, when we get around to getting them aligned to assemble it. But I'm going to have to remove just a little bit more plastic there. And okay, so that looks good. It goes all the way down. All right, so let's look at these rails. If you look in the instructions, it's kind of really hard to see. I mean, there are pieces that are fitted or molded in that could be the holes in the diagram, but they're kind of not. So the way this thing goes together, you have a left and a right, and there are 4 holes. 1, 2, then the other 2 there, 4. 2 and 2 is 4. And that's where these brackets go. So there's some rails that goes on the side of this thing. So we really need to make sure that the ones with the holes all the way through are facing towards the outside. So that one will go there, and then the other one will go there. Okay, so that makes up our left and our right. So we don't want to get these confused, because if those holes are pointing towards the inside, we're not going to be able to get those brackets on. So, and then of course for our center, it has a little square notch in it there. Well, it's not square, it's rectangular, but that's our center beam. And that's where that toothed piece that we fit before actually sits. So he's got to go in the middle, and that's the one we just got done fitting. Like so. And don't worry about the perfect plastic putty there. It's water soluble. We'll need to clean that up before we assemble everything. So now we need to make sure that we've got everything in its correct order. Okay, so that one, yes. So we've got it bottom side up facing us, and just making sure that the end pieces, or the left and the rights, are where they're supposed to be, so that those holes for our brackets are facing out. And then the two toolboxes on this center beam here face forward, or our connecting beam, or a structure, whatever you want to call it. That's kind of how all that is supposed to go together. So we're going to go ahead and apply some Tamiya Extra Thin here. And all we're doing is attaching these beams, launch rails to the beam. There we go. Yeah. So, and we are looking at the bottom of the assembly. Okay, this is not the top, so keep our orientation correct. Now we have these 3 pins where I'm just going to put some Tamiya Extra Thin there. And I did have to fit each one of those launch rails to it because there was a little bit of, wasn't quite even where all those pieces connected together. So just a couple of strokes with a sanding stick just to make sure that they're flat. And then we can just go ahead and cement this all together. Easy peasy. Next up, we just slide that geared rail, or toothed rail. It's not a gear, it's a tooth. So the toothed rail, and slide that right up into the center slot there on the center rail. And that's how that's supposed to go together. So I have found out that when it's in its full up position there, the teeth kind of dig in and kind of hold it into place there. So that's good. Now we'll just cement that to our center launch rail, and that's what we have there. So it's going to be really, really important that we allow that piece to plenty of time to dry. So with that done, we can go and look at our fitting of our missiles. Now we're not going to worry about the hoses there. You can see where they're supposed to connect. Right there, kind of like some jaws on the end of those rails there. And those hoses are going to fit on those little bitty nipples right there. So we're not going to worry about putting these on yet because really these missiles need to be securely attached to each one of those launch rails before we start fooling with that. So all right, so next up, I guess we need to check and make sure that our missiles do fit, and then we can work on those brackets. So if you saw the video where we assembled our missiles, there's this little T right on the bottom there, and it slides in between the rails that we just put on. And a little bit of resistance, but actually they kind of snap into place. And if you can see on the bottom of the missile there, that's kind of a stop for it, because that's how far back the missiles are supposed to go on those rear rails. So that's yeah, that's just the way it goes. So we just got to make sure that it'll slide between those front guide rails, and that they'll all go on. Now they do go on with just a little bit of a snap. So I don't know if it was designed that way or it's just the way mine turned out. But after checking the missiles, we're in good shape, except for, and I noticed this, that little stop block that's on the bottom of our missile. It doesn't fit in between the rails, and that's going to be a problem with getting the missiles to all set at the right angle. So I am just going to file this down just a little bit, just to make sure that it fits down in between the rear rails. That way we've got some surface area there, some contact area to actually cement these into place. Now, I mean, you wouldn't have to cement them in place if you didn't want to, but my intention is to probably go ahead and just fix these into place once everything's painted. So we just want to check and make sure again that everything goes together, and with it in position, that looks good. All right, very nice. So now finally we can start putting on these brackets. So there's 2 brackets on either side, and I am just kind of putting a little bit of, to me, extra thin on both parts. That way it should really adhere and kind of melt together. This needs to be a strong connection, and the holes that these brackets line up to, they are oversized for the pins that goes in them. So we are going to have a little bit of movement there, so we just want to make sure we get them as square as we possibly can. And so I'm doing the 2 brackets that would be toward, well, let's just let's just call it on the bottom section of the rail, because we're in the firing position. So I'm doing the left and the right, and yeah, as you can see, you can move these around. So I'm just going to use a straight edge across the top of the missile rails themselves, kind of as a guide to help me get these level. So they need to be level with one another on the left side to the right side. And if we have got that correct, we'll just be able to eyeball the next 2 brackets and line those up with these. So it's important that we have one bracket on both the left and right that is parallel to the ground, more or less, or perpendicular to the side of the rail. Hope that makes sense. hard to put into words. So with that, we can go ahead and cement up the next 2, and we'll just simply align them with the previous 2, which are squared the way they're supposed to be. And this is a tedious operation. If the pins and the holes had been perfectly done, then we wouldn't have to go through all this adjustment and alignment thing going on here. But, you know, since it's not, well, we're modelers. We'll just deal with it. So moving on, step 17, we have, this is the transport bracket that secures our missiles to the engine deck while the vehicle's in transit, so that they don't get beat up and fall off, I guess. So we need to go ahead and assemble that. So we have our large piece, and then we have the side that goes onto it. And it doesn't really fit all that well. You need to really do some filing and sanding to get it to seat the way it's supposed to. But I mean, it goes together, and there's no gaps or anything. So once you get it fitted, it goes. I just thought I would mention that, just in case you know, one of you guys want to build this kit. You do need to test fit all these parts to make sure that they're actually going to go together. So this, I think, is a little stop bracket for it, because it does lean over when the missiles are in their firing position. So we need to put that on. And then this is kind of like a hinge bar that goes onto the bottom of it. And that's going to mate up to the brackets that are molded into the engine deck. So we'll go ahead and assemble that. So next up we have these, well, these are hold downs. And they hold the clamp that holds the missile down. So there are actually 2 little bitty holes on the facing edges, and I'm just trying to push this little thing in there. Now all the glue's not set up, and I probably should have put them on earlier, but they will move back and forth, but it is a tight fit, and there are 3 of them, 1 for each one of those hold down clamps. And so I just popped those into place, so they're still movable at the moment. So we do have a latch, And we need to assemble that. And then on the top side of our bracket here, there are some filler pieces. And it does have a large tab down inside there, so but just make sure that it gets fully seated. Otherwise, it'll leave a gap there. And then we have the second one to put in. Then on the very end, we have this tray. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it a tray. And what it does is it secures the end bracket there when it's open. All right, so we need to go back to our instructions here, and you need to make a decision. If you are going to have the missile in the stowed position, then those two-piece brackets that go over top of each missile are going to have to be in the locked position. Or if you're going to have the missiles in the firing position, they kind of fold up out of the way. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. I want to have the missiles in the launch position. So we're going to put these little brackets or hold downs in their folded position out of the way there. And also these rails, there is a difference whether you've got it in the stowed or open position. So you need to pay attention to that. We're going to do it just like in step 20, how it looks there. Yeah, that's kind of the orientation that those parts need to be in. So we'll start off with the piece that's actually attached to this carrier assembly, I guess. I've probably called it 4 or 5 different things in this video, mainly because I really don't know what to call it. So I'm just going to attach that, and it's a 2-piece clamp, more or less. So, well, 3 if you count the bottom. So, little bit of, to me, extra thin there, and we're going to attach the 2 together. I guess you could attach the 2 pieces together and then set it in there and fold it, but either way, you're going to have to do a little bit of movement on them. Just trying to make sure that where the pins would be normally, because there are no pins in this section right here, that you do have those hinges kind of lined up so it looks right. And that's the first one, and I'll go ahead and do the other 2 off camera, but they all go together the same way. So now we can go ahead and set our launcher and launch base with our launch rails into place on top of the hull. And we have these rails. Now, I'm not so sure that they're hand rails. Of course, I'm putting that on wrong. It doesn't go that way. So anyway, they do just glue up on the side here. We're going to start with this one particular bracket, and I'm going to have to do each side individually, and we're kind of going to get to that in a moment. So a little bit of extra thin there, and those connection points are really small, and these rails will fall over, so you just kind of have to be really careful with it. It is very fiddly. That's the word I'm looking for. So once we get this to stand up, now it doesn't matter at this point if it's perfectly straight or not, just get it to stand up, and we'll go ahead and put the next one on. And same thing, it's kind of like a balancing act to get it to stand as well. And then there is our top rail. So I'm putting the rails in the firing position, which means it goes along the length of the vehicle. If you're in the transport mode, they would go crossways. So that's kind of important to remember. So with a little bit of me extra thin there, as you can see, this is a nightmare to do. So I kind of came up with a better way to do that. Lucky for me, I happen to have some machinist squares. They have a large heavy metal base and they set at 90 degrees. And we want these rails standing up 90 degrees from the horizontal. So I'm just using them to hold everything into place until the glue dries or dries sufficiently that I can go ahead and do the opposite side. So only going to do one side at a time there.
Okay, so here we are dry assembled. So we have the launch table, or whatever you want to call it there, an Erector assembly with our missile rails, and then our missiles are just set in place. We haven't attached the missiles yet because, well, you know, I think they're going to be a slightly different color of green. So, yeah, for painting purposes, we don't want to attach the missiles yet. Of course, all of this it still works. So that was a lot. I know, and the video was kind of long, and I apologize for that. But I really wanted to get through all that to include, of course, the little transport latch and lock mechanism here for holding our missiles in place while the vehicle's in motion. So, yeah. So we have those two things done. Now, one of the things that we did not do, I haven't still figured out those hoses that goes on the back of the Erector assembly yet. I think maybe I just need to trim a little bit off of those so that we can actually get it in the firing position. And then, of course, we have this small black tubing here that goes to the missiles from the launch rails. And we haven't cut that stuff, but since we're going to take the missiles back off and paint everything, it's probably best to leave that until after everything gets painted and we get our missiles actually mounted. Then we'll worry about those little hoses there. So that's my plan anyway. So I guess that's it for part 4. Next up, we're going to start painting. So that'll be part 5. So special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys I keep making these videos. And if you're new to the channel and not a subscriber, I hope today I earned your subscription. And like I said, I'm really sorry that the video is so long, but we'll try to cut that down next time. So, all right, well, then that's it. And you guys stay safe, and I'll see you next Friday.